Justice League, issue 59. Brian Michael Bendis writing with David Marquez on the art. Obviously in the main story. Here. Obviously, I was going to read this anyway. Matt was going to read this anyway.
Yeah.
Connor, on the other hand,
going to read this anyway.
was not going to read this, but a patron is making him read this. So all three of us have read the start of Bendis' Justice League. And before we get to Connor's misery, which I'm sure it's going to be, Matt, how do you feel about the first issue of Bendis' Justice League?
A bit unfulfilled, just because now that I know that it's double shipping, everything makes sense. But when I read that earlier this week, I had no idea, because as I told Connor, this felt like half an issue, just in the pacing and everything. And I liked what I read for the most part, but when I got to the end, I expected there to be more. And now we're moving to the Ram V Justice League Dark story. So I thought we were past double shipping, but if this is how the pacing is going to go, then and that's what Bendis is more comfortable with, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I guess I'm just used to Bendis shipping, because this felt like a Bendis pace book to me, in a good sense, because this is not like his Legion of Superheroes, but there's so many goddamn like text boxes and bubbles.
This was so quick to read. That's why when I got to that page, I was expecting more, just because of the way he paces stuff out. So yeah, this flowed. I had that sort of bookend, and it's not quite at the end of the issue, but the bookending with Green Arrow and Black Canary, like talking about the Justice League and how that feeds into things, which is obviously going to lead to them having new members, because they're saying, I mean, not only are they new, but it's like, hey, people need to see us a bit more relatable, and maybe we should shake things up. Maybe we're too comfortable with who's on the team, which I assume is going to eventually lead to Black Adam being on the team in some capacity, given what else the story sets up in this one. But the main sort of part of the story is that this monstrous being, who has a very kind of nonchalant attitude to what he's doing, appears in Kandak. Can I just say that I kind of loved, before he shows up though, this scene of Black Adam kind of being like a good leader to this child who's visiting his mother's grave. I thought this was a nice scene. Yeah,
it's what Black Adam always does.
This is the best version of Black Adam for me. Like I don't like necessarily the overtly evil guy that's like a dictator. I like the one that's like, no, I have to make the tough decisions.
This is kind of the John's Black Adam, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when he's comforting this kid, and then he talks about his past that we know from way back in the Infinite Crisis days, how he lost his wife and the whole family and whatnot. Like, it was really touching.
Yeah. I was into this. It was nice to see this side of Black Adam. And of course, this demonic looking monster shows up with the horns. And very quickly it becomes, it's apparent that this is going to be a fight. Black Adam takes him on. Probably a good time to mention Marquez's art and layouts are pretty spectacular for the most part.
Yeah.
Other than I think his Black Adam looks really young. Like, weirdly young.
Yeah, but I think that's a minor thing, because I can always chalk that up to that's magic or whatever. Like, maybe he'll refine the design.
Maybe
as he goes.
Inconsistent with Black Adam to me, and for the most part, I actually really like the art in this issue. I think I tend to not have much bad to say about Marquez's very good eyes.
No, that's what I was saying. Everything that I've read from Marquez, I've always liked, even if the story itself wasn't like,
Yeah, which is why I'm kind of making a point of saying, I didn't really like his Black Adam face, because it's unusual for me to not like Marquez.
Yeah, of course the Justice League show up. It's not the full team though, because obviously we're missing a couple of members and they've not necessarily filled out the ranks yet, and obviously Green Arrow and Black Canary are here. So it's just Superman, Aquaman, Hawkgirl and Batman show up. And they're like, hey, we'll take it from here, we're Justice League, and we have a bit of a fight. I did kind of like the little touch here of like Superman going, oh, this guy's clearly the one causing the trouble. Black Adam's not the one, he's not on the wrong side of this. So I like that. But there's some fun pages here. Aquaman attacking this monster with not quite a Sharknado, but it's not
Shark Wall, I believe was the phrase.
Might as well,
it's not a million miles away. A lot of sharks. It's a fun page. And I like his reason as well. He's like, hey, normally I wouldn't jump to this immediately, but you were going toe to toe with Black Adam. That tells me how powerful you are.
Yeah.
So I'm not pulling punches. But then, of course, the weird stuff starts happening, which is when he tries to actually attack him directly with a trident, this blast happens that throws him back, and then he affects Kendra's, her Morning Star.
Yeah, the nth metal, right? And
yeah,
he reacts to it.
The nth metal starts like it's supercharged and starts vibrating and glowing red in her hand. In fact, the art on that page, when you turn the page and it's like the swirling colors around them, it's pretty spectacular. But it's like, hey, something's weird here. It's reacting as if just like it's like almost like a chemical reaction of just being near this guy.
And
the others fly in. There's some action scenes. The beast escapes through a portal somewhere they can't follow, so they're sort of left to sort of ponder who this is, and they're going to go look into it. I kind of enjoyed this glance here as Black Adam sort of tells him to leave and flies back towards Kandak. There's a moment where Superman looks over at him and Black Adam looks sort of back over his shoulder. There's a moment of maybe it's some respect, but certainly one of understanding that Black Adam is either appreciative or knew he needed help, or to that effect.
Yeah, the way that I took it is like I tried not to involve myself in this stuff to keep people safe, right? So that was kind of like a knowing glance, like, hey, thanks, but I don't want this to be a regular thing.
Yeah,
and then that kind of sets up what we just read in the solicits, right? About him kind of joining, maybe, if he's a little bit more hesitant because he just likes to be the ruler of this small country.
I mean, it may not be an official, he's a member of the League. It may just be that it's an uneasy alliance with him that'll last an arc or two, and that's why he's kind of seen as a, on the covers, he looks like a member, kind of thing. And that leads to the debate with, back at the Hall of Justice. Barry's looking into things, Science, Kalex is looking into things, and Canary and Green Arrow are explaining, hey, Clark, people see him as a human now, they relate to him a bit better, we should do more of that, maybe we should shake things up with new members, so but the unknown energy of this beast does actually match one thing. There's one other thing that Kalex has analysed that this matches, and this ties in to Naomi, her energy signature matches this, implying that this thing either comes from the same dimension as her or comes from a similar place as her. Obviously more to go into, but the final page of the book is Naomi showing off to her friends her new powers and Black Adam coming to see her. So that's your cliffhanger. How do you feel? I mean, before we get, because again, I'm sure Connor's going to give us his list of complaints in a minute. How did you feel about this tying back into Naomi? Because to me, it kind of felt like, oh, this does feel like a Justice League book, and I enjoyed it. I think it flowed really well. But it's very clearly that Bendis has almost like an overarching thing for all of his DC work that's sort of still coming into this.
Yeah, and to me that's okay, but I can also understand how people would feel that he's wedging the character in. But being that I've read all of his stuff at this point, had she shown up in Legion, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's on it. But here, it seems like it fits story-wise, so I'm not, I'm not that worried.
I guess the complaint, and this isn't something that I have because I don't really care either way about Naomi, right? Just want to make this clear. This is not me doing that. What I assume the complaint would be is it feels weird to throw her straight to the Justice League, where surely she should be doing stuff with some sort of Teen Titans level team first.
Well,
if she was in Titans, right, but a bit more long term.
I think the answer to that is that Bendis, in her introduction, in her own book, set up that she's from this other universe, this other dimension that is completely new to DC, and that maybe the reason why he even did that was to set up other things he had planned later. That this wasn't just going to be, it wasn't just going to be Naomi that came from that universe. There was going to be other things that the plot was going to delve into. So it's not so much that she's been going to be recruited as a member of the Justice League right away, even though she effectively might be because she's going to be working alongside them for a while. It's more that she is heavily part of the plot device that is driving whatever the threat is. So
yeah, I think it's fine if she's, again, not part of the League, but if she's kind of there while they're dealing with this stuff specifically. But once this threat's dealt with, I would not want her to be sticking around and being a regular member of the league.
No, but
again, not because of anything about her character, but more just feel like that's a bit much for the league.
Yeah, but I feel like she's just kind of passing through, because we do know that he had plans for Naomi season 2.
Yeah.
Right. And he's just kind of, waiting
he was
for the
always
artist
he was waiting for Campbell, who has been doing Far Sector, right? Which, given that that's coming to an end now, maybe that'll open back up.
I wonder when this arc ends, if that's roughly when we're going to get this announcement of season 2, because maybe the whole point of season 2 is that it's going to be set after this Justice League story that she's involved in. So that would make some sense. I think it probably works well enough for a new reader. And when I say a new reader who's not read Naomi, right? Because the way it introduces her is that there's a mystery monster. Oh wait, there's one thing that also is from there. Oh hey, there's this character, and maybe you don't know exactly who she is, or you've even heard of her. But clearly, I think next issue they're going to kind of establish some of that. This is just, hey, there's this character who's related, and the cliffhanger doesn't depend upon knowing who she is. All it depends upon is that she's connected to this monster, and Black Adam's going to see her. There's enough in this issue that's set up for this cliffhanger to make sense as a cliffhanger, I think.
Yeah. Well,
as someone who hasn't read Naomi, that is not one of my problems with this issue.
Oh, I'm sure. Okay, let's go then. So, let's let Connor fly.
Okay, right. First off, this wasn't going to be my first point, but I'm going to kind of come back to where Matt mentioned the stuff with the pacing at the start, which I think is goddamn atrocious, frankly. Like, don't get me wrong, part of me was glad it was over, but my God, it was over. There's nothing there. It's like, where's the rest of the issue? And going, oh, well, it's going back to double shipping. That's not good enough for me. That's a terrible excuse to pace it with double shipping in mind. Because can I make one counterpoint here? Is I actually didn't have that feeling that Matt did. I didn't feel like I was missing half of an issue. I did. I literally got to the last page and was like, wait, it's over?
I think it's important to note that I don't agree with the basis of this argument being that it feels that it's lacking in terms of content, because I didn't feel that. But that's clearly a personal thing.
That's fair. And maybe it's not even that it's lacking content, but more just the pacing of it felt like it didn't feel like I was at the end of an issue. It didn't have an appropriate flow and rise to it. It's kind of what I'm getting at here more than anything, rather than the amount of content, because the pages are clearly there. I'm not arguing with that. And this book is indicative, almost on a meta point at one point though, of why I despise Bendis team books specifically. And this is, goes back to what I've always said. It's not the amount of dialogue, although Bendis can be wordy. But this book isn't that. But it is still a textbook example of what I hate about Bendis books, is that every character sounds the goddamn same. I could remove the names of the dialogue in things and just apply it to someone else, and I would not notice. For like 90% of the speech bubbles in this, they all sound the same. Even the villain sounds the same.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I feel like his voice for Superman carries over from his Superman stuff. So I feel like I knew where Superman, or even Ollie. That said, his Ollie at the beginning, it took me a second to realize that's who was talking.
Well, I think for me, maybe his voice does carry over from Superman, but then it gets to, well, everyone just sounds Superman-esque by that logic. I don't know who they all sound like.
And I'm okay with that.
I'm not. They should sound...
I have never had a problem with Bendis' characters having a consistent kind of like shared wit to them. It's never been a problem for me.
Yeah, I really despise, and there's almost like a self-aware meta reference to it later, where Green Arrow is like, "Hey, we could get some new voices in here." I'm like, yeah. Like, because they're all just kind of making the same things. We're all we're all starting to see things through a similar prism. I'm like, yeah, you're all starting to sound the damn same. But I don't think that's Bendis actually doing it intentionally. I genuinely I think it was a weird happy accident almost of my critique. But it felt particularly poignant getting to that. But that is what I hate about Bendis books more than anything. Again, especially team books, and it is front and center here, and that's what I hate about this, because along with the pacing as well, like I say, but art's solid. Like I say, my one thing with Black Adam's face aside, really like the art.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I don't have any problem with this Naomi thing, like you're saying there. The way it, again, having not read it, the way it introduces as, oh, there's a match to the thing that was already going on. That happens to be Naomi. That works in a perfectly fine context within itself. Like, you don't have to know who Naomi is for that to work. I know barely anything about her beyond the bare essentials that I picked up, and that was definitely not a problem for me. Again, like I tell you, the external argument of him inserting her into her stories is kind of something unrelated, but I don't think it's a problem in this issue.
Yeah,
I just feel like it's the pacing that killed me as well in this issue.
Well, I think to jump to a point that I think we should reiterate here for the just the plot going forward is that when this monster leaves,
Brutus, his name is
Brutus. There you go. He says that he's clearly ill prepared for this because he basically is like, oh wait, there's a lot of you superpowered beings. Oh, clearly I need more. I need to actually come back with better equipped, which might mean more weapons. It might mean allies. It might mean a number of things.
Right.
But
I think specifically it's actually in regards to the nth metal, because it's after that reacts because the trident doesn't hurt him at all, right?
No,
he doesn't care, and then it's the nth metal, and it does hit him, and he's like, where is it? Oh, what's that battle stick made out of? It's wow. Okay, what's that battle stick made out of? And then he's like, right, I was all prepared for this. So I'm assuming it's something to do with the nth metal rather than superpowered beings in general.
Yeah, it does make me wonder though what else is going to affect him. What that he's not predicted, because okay, he'll come back prepared for nth metal, but what if kryptonite ends up like giving him like a rash or something?
Or you wonder how magic affects him.
Yeah, magic.
Like with Black Adam. Yeah,
just throws a Zatanna at him. That'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean that's the most. You could make that argument for most things.
Based on the backups.
Well, I actually didn't read the backup in this particular case, but it was mainly because I was an hour behind. So I thought, you know what, since I wasn't feeling the previous backups with this, I'll skip it for now. But I'm not necessarily ruling out going back and reading it later. But
you might do once we talk about King Arthur stuff.
I definitely won't. I definitely will never go back to it.
It definitely goes into what Ram V was doing with.
Before you get to it, we should rate and just because I was pretty into this main story. I think it's a solid start to his run. I think it didn't rush ahead too far. I kind of like that it takes some time in just establishing what his team feels like with each other. So I appreciate those elements. But yeah, Matt, what are you going to rate the main story here? Justice League.
I'm going to give this one, and it's solely on the art for the most part. I'm going to give it a 7.5.
Connor?
I'll give it a 4.
Solid 8 out of 10 for me. Thank you very much. But yes, okay. So the backup, which is Ram V and Zermanico, Justice League Dark. So like I said, I did not read this because I was underprepared, forgetting that we had to start an hour earlier. So I decided to let this one go. But you two may discuss.
I mean, to start with, I think just the pacing, because this is a 10-issue story. I think it uses its 10 pages way better than the main story. Don't get me wrong, it is short, but I mean, it's 10 pages. It actually is short. It doesn't just feel short. But we open in the Augustus Priory ruins, in Wales, near Caerleon, which already is like, okay, we're doing King Arthur stuff, because Caerleon was basically where Camelot was supposed to be before they came up with Camelot as a concept and as a name.
Right.
It was Caerleon Castle.
Yeah,
and it makes all these.
From reading What's in Future, I realized I don't have quite the handle on Arthurian legend that I thought I did.
That's because there are so many different versions.
Yeah. So here you could tell that Ram V has a very specific version of Arthur, and not necessarily Arthur, but maybe Merlin. And again, this should have came as a surprise based off of the Future State story that we got, and how Merlin had taken things over and all of that stuff. So
and this does essentially boil down into two plots. You have the Merlin stuff, which kind of bookends in, and the Zatanna and Constantine stuff in the middle. Should we just tackle all the Merlin stuff first?
Yeah, let's do that first.
Yeah, so he's at these Roman ruins, which again, like I say, was potentially a basis for Camelot. And you got this man who walks up, who starts doing some magic, and very visibly magic, and changes the entrance of the castle and goes through, and all of a sudden it looks completely different. It's how it was when he was there, and I think it's already fairly clear at this point. This is probably Merlin. It doesn't, especially coming off of the future state issues,
right? As soon as you get to that, what is it, third, fourth page, and he's in there, his hipster haircut, notwithstanding, it is traditionally what we think of as Merlin. But he's got
the sword and the stone.
Yep. With what looks like a lady in the lake, waiting.
See, very interesting. I would say not a lady in the lake.
Well, I do feel there are some iconography there.
There's similarities, but I think it's very notable that she's only standing on the edge of the water, and she is never submersed in the water. She's never laid in the lake.
It was. Yeah, so you find out that this person, it kind of reminded me of Last Crusade, where you have this knight standing by, in this cavern, and looking over Caliburnus, which they say, is the sword in the stone wasn't actually Excalibur, right? Because that belongs to the Lady of the Lake.
Excalibur's the Lady of the Lake one. This was the sword he had before Excalibur.
Right, and so this is in the stone, and looking over, and you find out that this knight is Sir Elnara Rashtu, and she was supposed to be the 13th knight, and they ends up having eternal watch basically until Merlin or Arthur returns. So when he returns, she kneels, and and
just to get to that part. Cut ahead at the end, basically, she's like, "Oh, Merlin, did we win the war? This is great. You finally returned." And he's like, "Yep, you did wonderful, but your part's been played," and then just stabs her. It's like, your watch has ended. Leaves her bleeding out in the lake as he strolls towards the sword and takes it out comfortably and melts it down, but takes out the jewel in the hilt, the ruby. It looks like a ruby anyway.
Right.
And takes that.
Yeah, a lot more brutal than I remember Merlin, even in the other tales, right? Like.
Yeah, this is very definitely a questionable Merlin. I don't know what exactly.
Yeah, straight up evil Merlin. You could say.
Well, that's the thing. I don't know if it is straight up evil. I think it might be very misguided, but there might be some good intentions behind it.
He puts his fist through her body.
He does. But but I don't know what his purpose is here. He's like, he's saying he's going to drag the world towards its destiny.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what For all we know, his vision of its destiny might be objectively better, and it can be one of those classic stories of we need to get there naturally, not dragged there by a dictator. But it makes it more interesting if that is the case. But we really don't know yet.
No,
but really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, countering that, we get a subtle art change here for how they tell the story. And this is the same artist, right? This is still...
Yeah, it's all Zamanico, but you have him telling the flashbacks with this and
then they look painted here. It's mainly just this one, where they're talking Zatanna and Constantine are sitting in the back of this truck going through New Mexico, and they I think it's Constantine that's telling her the story of there was this priest who claimed that they recorded these prophecies in the 7th century, and this book ends up in the hands of this, I would assume, metal band, who ends up during a live performance.
The book doesn't end. The book is completely is separate. Like that. That's the whole thing. So the book is discovered somewhere else. And it's got its own little cult that follows the book. But then separately in the 90s, you've got this band who sang an unplanned 8 minutes in ancient Sumerian, which I feel like this is like hitting some deja vus. This might be a real thing that happened, because I've got some deja vu of some band doing this. I couldn't tell you exactly, but it's just like there's something in the back of my head about singing in Sumerian, being something there.
Not to drag this too far into wrestling, but there was a wrestler who's now known as Aleister Black. Deep occult vibes.
I'm shocked with a name like that.
Well, you're right. But before that, he was a wrestler known as Tommy End. And he has all these occult tattoos. but he was part of a tag team called Sumerian Death Squad. And it's very similar to a lot of this stuff here, which I wasn't well aware of, you know? But his whole vibe, their whole vibe of this band definitely spoke Aleister Black to me. So I thought that was pretty I should say entertaining, but like I hadn't made that connection before. But yeah. So they talk about this and how this, you know, I'm sure this cult will come in to play.
Yeah, basically when they translated the ancient Sumerian, the prophecies actually lined up with the ones from the 7th century, and they're like, maybe there's something to this. And it happens to be, you know, the place they talk about is this day and this place. He's like, yeah, I mean, that sounds interesting. Let's go check it out.
So this is based off of a real thing, I guess. It says, listen to the oldest song in the world. So there is a song written in Sumerian, right? That is around. So that's cool that Ram V's put that in there. But anyway, you know, they're heading to find. I have to refresh because I read this early.
Well, they don't know exactly what they're going to find. They're just going towards this place where the prophecy is. And they get there, and the house is burning, and there's a big like mob outside, it seems. And they're like, what's going on? Everyone's fighting. And, you know, Constantine's like, right, all right, Zatanna, you know, pull out some magic and stop this, you know. And she's like, I can't.
Right.
So, you know, I'll explain it later, but can you do something? And just to speculate, I wonder if, I don't know if it's a physical or a literal thing, but the aftermath of what happened with you know, the Upside Down Man, she's lost her powers, or if it's a mental thing that she's, you know, she's just scared of her magic now.
It has you know, magic has its price, right?
And maybe she's scared herself. Of what that cost might be in the future. Yeah,
she doesn't want to unleash anything, and he does some pretty nifty blood magic here with his watch. You know, he cuts his hand, puts blood on it, stomps on it, and it allows him to stop time. Yeah. Which is pretty cool. Which this is where the story really picked up for me, because this is my kind of stuff. But he doesn't know that the prophecies were both indeed true, and that there's an angel who arrived in a bolt of lightning, followed by a demon. So we have the angel Orpheal and the demon Bifrons. Where I'm already like, okay, this is Justice League Dark that I'm enjoying.
Playing our game here, isn't he?
Yep. And so. They basically, you know, the angel came up from the top, and, you know, the demon came up from the bottom, and they both went about their tasks with both sets of cultists, right? So they kind of stirred them all up.
Yeah.
And says, then the children looked upon the gift from Orpheal and saw him in his true form. The light blinded them, and then the sulphuret, so then that's the demon people, you know, they saw him in his, and it drove them all mad. So now I'm also getting some kind of, you know, Lovecraftian imagery mixed in here, which we know from Swamp Thing that, you know, Ram V clearly has an interest in.
Yeah. Here. I mean, and there's also, you know, there's a lot of ancient religions, you know, you look upon the true form of a god, it will kill you or drive you mad.
Well, and
you're looking at.
Right. I don't think Lovecraft pulled that from whole cloth, right? That's not unique to him. Just, I was wanting to point out, you know, the way that Ram V's mixing horror with the fantasy side, where, you know, when Tynan had this book, it seemed definitely to edge more towards horror. Whereas here, I feel like
playing with more mythology.
Yeah, Ram V wants to balance them both here. And so basically that they end up giving, you know,
Jason Blood shows up.
Yeah, that's the angel was carrying a bag, right? And from this bag, you know, he shows up, and that's when I'm starting to make the connections with Merlin and Future State and all this other stuff. And yeah, so Jason Blood shows up, and they're, you know, Constantine and Zatanna are both completely shocked.
Yeah, and his final message is, you know, from the edge of we stand at the precipice, from the edge of all reality, something beyond knowing has returned, and that's where it actually cuts back to the Merlin stuff, and it's the end of this story. But again, you know, there's a clear parallel, you know, when you put that lettering onto the next page, that you know, something beyond knowing has returned is on the Merlin page.
Right.
There's a clear intention to try and link that in our minds, going, okay, so Merlin's the threat is clearly what it's showing here. Really interesting stuff, man. I love what this is playing. Even in 10 pages, like it's got a lot of depth to it. And I'm just so excited to see what Ramby's doing with this. Because this is now like the first time he's kind of unhinged on the book on his own, as opposed to doing, oh, right, okay, he was wrapping up all the time.
Following up.
He brought his own voice for sure, but it wasn't his ideas that he was starting with. Whereas this here, this could have been a, just a Justice League Dark issue 1 for all intents and purposes. And
yeah, definitely.
Really excited for that.
Yeah, I still wish it had its own book though, because I would definitely want more than 10 pages.
I do as well. Me
know.
too. I appreciate though that it feels correctly paced for 10 pages. Like there's a solid, like, okay, we've got multiple plots. We go back and forth. We're not overextending it by trying to go with too many different plots.
Right.
It gets in and out, and art's great. Zamanico does a great job throughout. You have that page with the telling the story where it goes all painted is particularly gorgeous. The whole thing is pretty great. I have very little to actually complain about beyond just the fact that, man, I wanted more.
Yeah, no, and again, art, just that scene with the band, it looks so much different than when we saw Zamanico, and then you get to the scene where everyone's frozen, and just the way that the colorist works in there with it doesn't quite do that transition in colors, but it feels like it gets darker the further you go down the page. And
and just there are a lot of really interesting backgrounds as well. I mean, outside of the panels, because obviously instead of just white, obviously sometimes it is just white behind them, but there are often like really intricate designs that look like mosaics or things like that that are just like behind them, which feels like it's a lot of work for just external, literally just background work that it's not even inside panel backgrounds. It's just there,
right.
But it gives it a lot of texture that really makes it feel unique.
Right.
I mean, I'd give it like a 9, honestly. Nothing to really complain about.
Yeah, I'm on the same spot as a 9. So it's Ram V's good. Like, who would have thought?
Yeah, I know.
Well, for you two who read both stories, rate the whole book, Matt.
So you have a 7.5 and a 9. So I'll give the whole book an 8.
Carter?
Oh god, this is kind of all over the place for me, because I give it a 4 and a 9, but then the 9's lower weighted and really it's shorter. With a 6.
All right, there you go. I enjoyed Bendis' first Justice League issue. I was into it.